The Métis are a distinct Indigenous people. Métis communities in Ontario emerged along waterways and fur trade routes before Canada was a country. These historic Métis communities, which persist to the present day, develop their own customs, traditions, and identities that are rooted in kinship, relationship to the land, and a distinctive culture and way of life.
Back in the day, if you were English or pure French, I don't think you really recognized somebody that was, as they call half-breed. You're half French and half native, so they were made fun of. They would have had a lot of heartache. Now, when you think of how many years later the Métis are accepted for what they are, and the culture they bring, and the music they bring,
The historic Georgian Bay Métis community is the largest documented community of Métis in Ontario. They are sometimes referred to as the Drummond Island Métis or the Drummond Islanders. Their story began in the late 1600s, long before Canada or the United States were countries. It's a story of New France, the United States, and Britain struggling to determine dominance, territories, and the borders that would separate the lands and waters of North America. It's a story of the Métis people being caught in the middle of that struggle and having to move many times. Those moves spanned many years and many locations. From Mackinac Island to St. Joseph Island in 1796, back to Mackinac Island in 1812, to Drummond Island in 1815, and to Penetanguishene in 1828, where Métis families continue to live today and have expanded to surrounding communities in Georgian Bay. The Drummond Island Voyageurs were a Métis community that fought to defend Canada during the War of 1812. After the war, the British ceded their island home to the Americans. As a result, they were forced to leave the lives that they had built on Drummond Island. Rather than dispersing, the community of Drummond Island Voyageurs migrated to Penetanguishene.
Our ancestors, the majority of them are Métis. Very few women were living in the interior that were from European heritage, so it was either First Nations or Métis women in that area. And you have French fur traders and later on Métis men marrying into those families, and that's what forms that Métis community. And the best place to relocate was Penetanguishene. Near the end of the War of 1812, they had started to build a naval depot here, naval establishments. And so it became the naval and military establishments with those soldiers that came down here. And they used this area, and the reason they were using it was kind of a backdoor protection to York, so that if the Americans did decide to attack again, there was these retired soldiers and a naval presence in the area that could defend the country, the land.
The major migration was in November of 1828. That's the time of great storms on the lakes. So they came by various means, schooners, canoes, bateaux, and they were families. They had to create shelter for the winter. That was the first thing. And those who took lots in Penetang on the west side of the bay, there were 20-acre lots, but that's an extremely steep hill and sandy, and they were expected to clear the land and farm.
These lots, 43 in total, became known as the French settlement.
If you look at the land, it's not good land. It isn't. So even if you wanted to start a farm, it's not where you should start. So they will not become farmers. Mostly they try and keep up what they were used to doing. So there's still some fur trade going on. There's a lot of work with the military. So some will work with the military like as forgeron, as a blacksmith, let's say, it's stuff like that. Others will be guides for people who want to go on the lakes and fish. I got really interested in these people because they're so resilient, and culturally it's quite an interesting group.
A.C. Osborne's Drummond Island narrative provides a unique glimpse into the world of this historic Métis community. His book, which was created from multiple first-hand interviews with Drummond Island voyageurs and their descendants, including Angélique Langlade. She was interviewed in the early 1900s, and Osborne noted that her command of English was very limited, but that her mixed dialect was picturesque and pointed.
My name, Angélique Langlade. Born, Drummond Island. Me, Chippewa half-breed. My mother, Josephine Aquada, Chippewa Squaw, Yankee tribe. My father, Charles Langlade, French half-breed. He's born Mackinac and moved Drummond Island with British. I know speak good English very well. I think about 7, 10, maybe 13-year-old when we come Pentang. We come Gordon's Pint, Mac Wigwam, Cedar Bark. Soldiers come next year after we come Gordon's Pint. My grandfather, Captain Charles Langlade. Good French, come Montreal, work for Hudson Bay Koi. Marry Chippewa Squaw, big soldier in British Army. He fight for Mackinac, 1812, much good. Loyal to English, had very fine sword.
Angélique's voice is particularly unique, as female voices were so rarely captured in the historical record.
For actually quite a few years, they didn't intermarry into either the French population that came later or the European settlers or the First Nations people. They didn't intermix with those because of different cultural beliefs, different religions. So yeah, it's a quite an interesting story that they didn't speak English. Very little. I think one of the quotes is they spoke French and First Nations language, and if you heard an English word, it was very rarely spoken.
Langlade's reference to the term half-breed is Métis self-identification. The half-breed petition of 1840 identified Métis as half-breeds residing in the town of Penetanguishene and was issued to the Governor-General as a request for assistance in the same spirit that other Indian communities were helped in the region. Prior to this petition, there were other petitions submitted to the Governor-General, such as one from August 1830 and one from May 1832. They were ignored. This petition of 1840 is key to understanding the history of this Métis community. It demonstrates that the Drummond Island voyageurs not only self-identified as half-breeds, but that the community acted as a distinct political unit. Their move to Penetanguishene did not change their status. Their way of life, language, and patterns of relationships remained distinct from the English settlers in the region. And this distinct way of life has maintained through the years, with traditions being passed from one generation to the next, and is felt in the contemporary Georgian Bay Métis community.
My part is to reconnect the kids and the young people with the culture of the music. In my lifetime, the music has brings people together to have fun, brings people together to dance, put a smile on their face. So in the music, you will get the kids to come back, and they will like the music, and they will want to play the music. And once they like that part of it, then they want to know where did that music come from. So they start going on the internet and finding out, well, how did that music come about? I really like it. So that's the start of it.
When I look back, there is so much that was passed along simply by modeling, by the way my father lived. One big one is the interest in plants. I've for 10 or 15 years now, I've been making salves and oils and that sort of thing, harvesting those plants when I can. And thinking back to my father, if he got a sting, he'd pick the plantain and put the juice on. Or if it was poison ivy, he'd pick jewelweed. So there's that thread that goes back, and I feel an ownership, that it's my right to be doing those things. The same with beadwork.
For the women in my family, doing the decorative arts as far as beading, embroidery, was a big part of our culture. And that had been passed down from generation to generation to my grandmother, who then taught me. And I still to this day do those things and teach others.
One of the things about Métis culture that I value is that historically we've always been kind of a bridge between two cultures.
I just love sharing our Métis culture. And I always just think those gifts that my grandmother gave me or my mother gave me, that if I can keep sharing them with other people, whether it's my children or my nieces or my students, then that gift will continue on, right? So my gift to them will continue. And I think that's part of kind of almost like canning our heritage and just being able to preserve it, to take it forward. And it's really, really important to me. And I just get, when I'm actually teaching, I often get very emotional. And even at times my little niece has asked me, Auntie, why are you crying? And I say, because my grandmother gave me a gift and she's gone now. So I said, I'm giving you the gift. When I'm gone, you'll be able to carry it forward. So that's really, really important to me.
Growing up, my dad always said, you need to be proud.
Of course, I'm proud to be Métis.
I'm proud to be Métis.
I am very, very, very proud to be Métis.
I'm proud to be Métis, so much so that I think every ounce of my body breeds Métis. I just love it.